Hello, I'm Jim Hargrove, restaurant business consultant with Shamrock Foods. And it's really great to be with you today, in particular in this time of renewed hope, after the hospitality industry has been through the darkest and toughest time possible in living memory. If you're watching this now and you're listening to my voice, and you've been a part of keeping a restaurant open still or many restaurants open still, you're to be congratulated. You are a rebel. You made it work in ways that I still continue to be just amazed and impressed what our industry has gone through and what we have survived in terms of keeping our businesses viable. Good job. We're almost there. It's getting a lot better all the time. In past presentations that you may have seen, you may have heard me talk about this idea of make it to May as a strategy to get to the other side of the shutdowns and the quarantines, not just to survive until May of 2021, but to be ready to thrive as the summer progresses and more vaccines go into more and more arms. And as we get closer and closer to that herd immunity that we've heard so much about, dining limitations are lifted, the restaurant industry finds itself, we're in the best potential situation that we have been in over a year. So I want to talk to you today a little bit about strategy moving through the summer and beyond that. And in terms of the people piece and the human capital, so much has changed there because of the pandemic. There continue to be widely polarized emotions and behaviors surrounding this long-awaited return to what eventually will be our normal. We'll see what that looks like when we get there. So it's important to consider how all of these different opinions and all these different emotions will impact the hospitality business as a whole, and specifically, of course, the restaurants that you're responsible for running. So I want to spend the next several minutes with you talking about what we see as distinct verticals in the people that touch your business, customers and the employees. It's this human factor that we've seen evolve and change so much, probably more so than anything based on the pandemic. So we think it's really important to spend a little bit of time on this idea of people practices. So what we're seeing is a lot of different, we're going to start with the customers that we want to talk about that we're seeing as we return to dining areas of the restaurants. So this portion of the conversation today will focus on how to train to these 5 categories that we're seeing in customers. Having training conversations, making talking points for your guest-facing staff, teaching them how to look for visual cues in the ways that customers have changed, we think is going to be just one of many strategies to successfully navigate our return to, hopefully, and probably, quite frankly, a robust dine-in landscape, whether it's casual service, QSR, fine dining, what have you. And these are the categories that we're seeing. The pent-up demand customer, this person is already back in your restaurant, has been for a little while. The ready to dine out, but still a little bit leery type of customer. A customer that hasn't dined out in literally over a year. They have yet to return to us. We want to figure out ways to attract them so they'll patronize your restaurant. There's I'll never dine out again. And this is a potential customer. We'll talk about strategies about getting them out and coming in. I just saw, and we see this buzzword now more and more, that has to do with folks that are really struggling to get out of their homes post-COVID, and it's the cave syndrome, and it's a real deal. So how do we reach those folks and get them into your restaurant? And there's also, I'm only going to continue to use your restaurant customer. I'm only going to use takeout just the way I have been for the last year. We'll talk about some strategies around that as well. So diving in a little bit closer, we'll look at these one by one for a moment with an eye on how to communicate and train your staff to best take care of these various customer pools. Customer pools have now changed because of COVID. And remember, we're going to have some kind of COVID hangover for at least the rest of the year, and probably more than that, that you're going to have to manage. And so we need to think about that, such as the enormous impact COVID has had. This hangover could go on for years, that hangover, right? We like to look at polling, especially through Data Central. They have a lot of real restaurant-specific polling. And one that we think is really interesting to look at is what's the first thing you want to do when you get back to the point where you can get back out and around and the vaccines are readily available. 60%, in first place, 60% adults say that I want to get back out into seeing my family and friends in their homes. And, you know, I can kind of attest to this too. I live in a cool little cul-de-sac with great neighbors. Everyone gets along really well. Once a month, pre-pandemic, we would get together for Christmas cookie exchange, 4th of July barbecue, a chili cook-off every year. We haven't done any of that since the pandemic hit. And so now in our text message chain with our neighbors, it's all, did you get your shot? When are you getting your shot? When are we getting together? That's a real desire, a real drive that I can attest to personally. In a very close second place, what do you want to do the most as things loosen up and vaccines get more available? 58%, just 2% behind the number one, is I want to go to a restaurant. So that's great news for us. Of that pool, that chunk of 58%, half of them say they're going to wait a while. More on them in a minute. So let's talk about the idea of this pent-up demand customer. They are not leery. They were the first ones back in your restaurant when the dining room opened, or they could come in and order from the counter, whatever the case may be. They are kind of, to a certain extent, the bull in the china closet customer. You can just feel the energy coming off of them. They just are so happy to be back out, and they want things to look and feel just like 2019, 2018. Of course, we know everything has changed forever, so we need to be able to manage to that person. Depending on where you are, there may still be some COVID restrictions, governmental COVID restrictions in place. You may have changed things, the way that you run your restaurant because of COVID. You've got some protocols in place to kind of keep people safe and make them feel good about that. The pent-up demand customer that's longing for 2018, they may have issue with that. So practicing these talking points with this important customer base is really important. So if the pent-up demand customer is in your restaurant, they're disappointed or even irritated that things aren't just like they were back in the day, they're going to let you know about it. They're going to let your staff know about it. Hopefully they won't do this, but they may let another customer know about it. So now is when we need to engage and have our practice talking points in place. This is when we use our I statements. And I statements are what we were all taught to do in terms of slowing or stopping alcohol service pre-pandemic. You know, you had to go to the table, I'm sorry, I can't serve you another drink today. I want you to be safe. So you can help diffuse that situation. And we can do the same strategy with this pent-up demand customer that we're talking about. You'd be ready to respond with something like, I know you're really excited to be back in the restaurant. I am too. I'm so glad you're here. We want to keep this momentum going. So can you please help me out with just following these one or two little measures that we still have to use? So we're diffusing that situation if somebody's irritated with us because they're the pent-up demand customer. Remember, the pent-up demand customer, while oftentimes vocal and outgoing, is not the only customer or customer base patronizing your restaurant. We have to remain agnostic and try to attract as many customers as we possibly can. We've got to make up some of this yardage that we lost last year. So the more people, the more customer bases that are now modified, that are coming to your restaurant, the quicker you're going to recover with those top line sales. So speaking of multiple customer bases, let's talk about this ready to dine out, but still a little leery type of customer. Of that 58% of customers that I mentioned a moment ago, fully half of them say, when I get vaccinated, I want to go back to a restaurant, but I'm going to wait. They are leery. They're waiting to see if there's going to be spikes. They're not quite sure if they're confident enough to go back into a restaurant just yet. The strategy here is to continue to tell the story of your safety and sanitation on your website and in your social media, and through, of course, the training of your employees. To go back to Data Central, when we ask consumers, what's the number one thing you want to see as you return to restaurants throughout our country, that the number one thing consistently is enhanced sanitation and COVID safety. So we really need to manage to that. So we're going to train our staff what to look for and what to say. But we need to tell this story of safety and sanitation in such a way that it comes off, it looks like and feels like a warm blanket and not a hammer. We've all been hammered over the last year by the news, by the restrictions, by all the quarantines, all that stuff that's gone on. That just has been really, really tough to deal with and not fun to listen to. So now's the time to incorporate this idea of the warm blanket of hospitality into your safety and sanitation efforts to attract those leery customers back into your restaurant. And then they'll be loyal to you and continue to patronize you. Again, we're going to train our staff on how to spot these folks, how to communicate with these folks, and what we're going to teach them, what we're going to continue to do, keep everyone happy at the restaurant, but also safe, using that hospitality as safety. Visual cues to look for as the months progress. Real vigilant mask use as things relax and people are really vigilant wearing 2 masks, and maybe body language or eye contact with someone that's not as vigilant as them, you can really pick up on that someone's irritated. That's a visual cue to us that we have a leery customer in our restaurant. Let's engage with that customer in such a way that we can help them to relax and enjoy the atmosphere while they still feel safe in your restaurant. Customers that are supplying their own sanitizer liquid in the pocket or the purse, this is much more common now, certainly than it was a year ago. But real vigilant use of that kind of thing, that's a visual cue for me. It's like, hey, here's a customer that's still a little leery about this, so let's be aware of that and treat them accordingly. Again, you're going to engage with them, they're more likely to be loyal to you. In full service situations, what we're seeing is as the customers are being taken back into the dining room to their table by the host, there, comments about how close the tables are together, or can we have that table over there in that closed section? You probably have a leery customer here. Again, it's awareness. Let's make sure that we meet them where they are and try to make them feel as relaxed and comfortable as we possibly can. Many of these important customers, these leery customers, they're going to remain leery for months, if not years to come. So let's just be prepared to manage that so that they'll continue to patronize our restaurants. Open and honest communication is going to keep them coming back to you as opposed to the competitor down the street. Remember, safety and sanitation as a warm blanket, not a hammer. So let's talk about another customer base, folks that literally have not used a restaurant in over a year. There's a lot of them still in our country. They're just not quite ready to get out. Oftentimes these are 60 plus, which is a really important chunk of our customer base that we really want to attract and make sure they're loyal to us. Now, this is a little bit different. We're not going to train our staff necessarily on talking points and cues. We have to train our customers how to use a restaurant in the post-COVID world. Think back to when we first came out from underneath the quarantines in 2020, our beloved 2020. Things like signage and social distancing, wayfinding, QR codes, all those things need to remain a thing. But if I haven't been in a restaurant in 12 or 14 months, I may not know how that works. So watch for those visual cues. Again, me personally, I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed. I still have both of my parents, and they're in their 80s, and they can't wait to go back into a restaurant, and they haven't yet. There's some hesitancy there. So when they do go back into a restaurant, I'm hoping that if it's one of your restaurants, you're going to recognize that hesitancy and engage with them and teach them how to use a restaurant in this day and age. So we need to observe and be prepared to jump in. If someone's struggling with a QR code, they don't seem to know what it is. They're not understanding the stickers that may remain on the floor that talk about social distancing, the sanitizer station in the lobby that may still be there. You may get questions or comments about the fact that the menu shrunk during COVID, which was a very common practice. All of these things, or just plain hesitancy, all of these things are telling us that this may be someone that needs to be taught how to use a restaurant again. We need to respect that and engage with them. Again, here's that loyalty piece that we're trying to gain. To again use my parents as an example, they have discretionary income to spend at restaurants. They just need a little help spending it. So why not enhance that top line with this 60 plus segment that we see? Interestingly, we learned what we learned about the 60 plus segment during the pandemic. They were forced by necessity. They've gotten much better at apps and cell phones and technology and internet. They had to get better at it so that they can engage with family and friends while still remaining safe at home. So that's to our advantage. Data suggests that the 60 plus segment in our country by percentage has grown the most in terms of using third-party apps, going to restaurant websites, clicking through and looking at things. So that's a real advantage to us that we didn't used to have pre-pandemic. So it's a little bit of a silver lining in the ability to engage with the 60 plus crowd that's got some money to spend. The fourth customer base I want to talk to you about is that is one of extreme reticence. Again, this is that cave syndrome that we're hearing about, people that just are so profoundly impacted by COVID they can't get back out of their home. There's no way I'm ever doubting. I'm going out to dine again. That's what they're telling the industry. So how do we get them to change their minds? First of all, think in terms of that mindset of never going out again as an opportunity to gain and not an opportunity that has been lost. Social media campaigns are very important here, featuring not just your great brand, great food, your great service, your great atmosphere, but these things that you're doing post-quarantine to keep everybody safe. That's what these folks are going to be looking for, in addition to the hospitality piece. Make sure you're combing through your online reviews, Yelp, Google in particular, it's by far and away the #1 place where people go to get reviews, look at what's going on with a restaurant, review somebody. So make sure we're taking really close observations with that. If you see anything says unsafe or unsanitary or COVID protocol, anything like that, address it immediately. Reach out to the customer, thank them for letting you know, and then you're going to solve the problem. If you see something consistently come up in your reviews, obviously you've got a problem. You just need to get your leadership team together and solve that problem, fix it permanently. You've got an email newsletter. We typically tend that email newsletter to people that have come into our restaurant that are engaging with our brand. And that's what it's focused on. So why not focus on those folks and encourage them for a bounce back visit, but also, hey, if you haven't been back yet, here's what's going on. Here's why you're still going to love this restaurant post-pandemic. Here's the great food service and atmosphere, but also the things we're doing to make sure that you're relaxed, calm, and comfortable. So really important and potentially a way to get those folks out of their homes and into your restaurant with their hard-earned money. Again, tell your story of hospitality and safety. Similar situation, and one that spans a lot more generations, is the customer that only wants to continue to use you for takeout, curbside delivery, that type of thing. Great. Keep doing what makes sense for your restaurant. But understand that spending habits have permanently changed due to COVID, to no one's great surprise. Again, data, here's an important piece of data. Data Central polling tells us that approximately 50% of consumers that used takeout, curbside, meal packs, delivery for the first time during the pandemic are going to continue to do so. 50%. That's billions of dollars in our country. Really important segment that we need to not turn our back on. So continue to think about what makes the most sense for your restaurant in terms of items that travel well, items that don't travel well. This can help dictate what our to-go menu should look like, your to-go packaging, your marketing of that process, your tracking. Really important to get data and track what's going on with the number of people using takeout, the amount of revenue that's bringing to the top line. Really understand that data and analytics, really, really important. In most cases, I would advise strongly against walking away from all the to-go efforts we made in 2020 and that you made at your restaurants, even if you weren't traditionally takeout friendly prior to the pandemic. Your customers definitely expect it now. So keep pushing that forward and keep and looking at that. It's not just a bag of food either, right? It could be charcuterie kit or a meal pack, all the creative stuff that we've seen you do during the pandemic to keep that top line revenue going. A lot of people still are going to want to have that experience. Some of these folks are also in the leery category. So if you want to get them from just using you as takeout and get them into the dining room, they may be leery about that. So consider dropping a note from the owner, the chef, GM, into that takeout bag and just saying, thank you so much. We're back on the other side of this thing. Here's the stuff we're doing to keep our restaurant great, keep you safe, all those kinds of things. A nice little note goes a long way. Drop a bounce back offer into that takeout bag, just a simple little coupon or offer that compels them to come back in the four walls. And that's the big win, because then they're engaging with your people and your concept. It could be something like, thank you so much for the order and the support. We'd love to have you come back in. Here's what we're doing. It's going to make you love your visit. If you come back in before May 30th, let's say at 10% off the bill or whatever it's going to work for your enterprise, and get those folks to use you for takeout and dine-in as well. So that's a lot right there about the changing landscape in terms of what COVID has done with the customer base. So now let's talk about employees for a few minutes. Here's what we're seeing out there as we visit restaurants. Basically four different categories of employees. Can't wait to get back to work in the restaurant, already back in many, many cases, and I want it to look like and feel like 2019, 2018. I'd like to get back to my old restaurant. I'm a little leery, similar to what we just talked about with leery customers. There's a lot of people left the industry, said, nope, I'm never coming back. I don't feel comfortable there any longer. And then I'll be back after all my options of unemployment dry up. I can feel a lot of you now rolling your eyes and shaking your head. So we'll talk about a strategy around those folks. They still may be important to us, even though they might aggravate us a little bit. So let's start with employees that are with you now and have been with you for a little while, and they want to party like it's 2019. I have seen, and you may have, employees that like the pent-up demand. Customer, they just want it to be just like it was before. We know for sure, as we talked about a moment ago, that consumers' number one thing in restaurants is we want to see an enhanced level of sanitation and cleaning efforts because of COVID. That's what we want to see. So if you have employees that are kind of dropping their guard and going back to pre-pandemic habits and not doing these new COVID protocols that are so important to the consumers, we need to solve that problem. I believe that the restaurants that find this balance between hospitality and safety are going to be the ones that will have the most success as the summer progresses, we get into the fall, into the holidays, into 2022. We found this balance and we're attracting the maximum number of customers into our restaurants. So I think it's important that we have these conversations. So if you see some of these behaviors that are contrary with any lingering government controls or some of the COVID stuff that you put into place, we need to have that one-on-one and the conversation that our industry has changed permanently. In addition to the one-on-one coaching, this is language that needs to go into orientation materials, training materials that are COVID specific, and what we're doing to make sure that we're attracting the most people. Talk about what you do different now than you did in 2019. And here's the thing, the ability to stay open and keep the local government or the state government out of your restaurant and not hassling you and allowing you to move forward as COVID lifts. And really importantly, the ability to avoid being canceled on social media is going to be really dependent on employee behavior and restaurant leadership, and to find that proper balance of hospitality and safety. So we can't party like it's 2019 quite yet. It's just a different kind of party now. The leery employee is really important to talk about. Let's spend a few minutes there. The story that you tell the leery restaurant worker that's not quite ready to come back is the same story that you tell your leery customers. Everything we do to protect the customer and our reputation also protects that employee. So lots of communication is the order of the day here with these leery employees that may very well be very, very important to your enterprise. An open door policy, establish one, manage one if you haven't already. Really important for folks to know that they can come and speak to their manager about whatever's important to them. 5 minutes once a week with the owner operator or the chef or the GM or the employee's manager, whatever it is. 5 minutes once a week with each employee goes a long way. This is a strategy we saw used a lot during the height of closures, and it was very beneficial. And we saw people felt heard. They felt more engaged with the owner and more engaged with the restaurant, and consequently, it was easier to keep folks coming back in, even if they were kind of leery at that time. So think about that in terms of that communication with the leery employee. Folks that are telling us, I left the business and I'm never coming back. These are potential employees that may want to finally come back to the business. Consider this an opportunity to find and not to lose. The stance of never wanting to work in a restaurant again because of the ripple effect of COVID, I believe, is going to lessen in the weeks and months to come. And these valuable employees are going to start to think, well, it's an awful lot better out there. Maybe I'm going to start looking at some restaurant wants ads online. This is where you have your campaign while you're recruiting for people to work at your restaurant. You're telling the employee culture story, you're telling the management support story, you're telling the benefit story, scheduling and money, all that stuff we've also told. Maybe you also need to tell the story of why it's going to be okay for you, someone that has left the business for a long time. Here's what's changed. Here's why you don't need to worry. Here's the steps we're taking to keep our customer base and our employees safe. Let's tell that story and attract those potential employees back into your restaurant. The last one, and then I'll start to wrap up here. I won't come back until all my unemployment benefits have been exhausted. Relief packages for Americans and American businesses were a great need. Everyone had a different type of need as this COVID-19 progressed. However, it can be frustrating and aggravating to have work, have hours for somebody, and you reach out to them like, nope, I'm not coming back, not until all this stuff has sunsetted. On the one hand, you just have to move forward and hire the people that you need to hire. As a side note, that individual that's waiting to come back, it's a little bit risky, right? Because if they're going to wait until late summer or fall, when everything sunsets, the employee pool is the same size, if not bigger. And unfortunately, as we know, the number of restaurants has gotten smaller. We're going to lose estimated 18% of restaurants in our country permanently. So anyway, the other side of that is if that person doesn't want to return until all unemployment is exhausted. They're genuinely a good employee that could be an advantage to have you back. It's arguably worth to bring them back. So just stay in touch. Assign someone, or maybe it's yourself, to reach out to this employer or these employees every 2 weeks by text. How you doing? We're still here. We'd like to talk to you, especially as we get closer and closer to all of the conclusion of these benefits that folks have been getting, unemployment benefits. So those are those 4 categories of employees and how to manage to them. So finally, I'll wrap up with you with this thought. The last year, probably more than ever, all of you have found yourself in the business probably more than you ever have been, as opposed to on the business as restaurant leaders. You had no choice but to get in the business to keep it alive. So you've been down in your bubble with your head down, just fighting every single day and feeling like maybe you're on an island. I talked to a lot of people like, I feel like I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one fighting to keep my restaurant alive. We weren't the only one. We were all fighting. And there's help out there. And so Shamrock Foods certainly has a ton of help for you. A lot of one-on-one consultative services. The team that I am privileged to serve on has decades and decades and decades of experience. We may have already developed a tool for one of our other customers. Is something that you're thinking about or wondering about. So at Kitchen Intelligence Live, you can go to the Virtual Consultants Lounge, log in, ask a question. You're going to be dealt with immediately, talk to them immediately. Or you can go to the Shamrock Food Company website under Restaurant Resources and request a 30-minute consultative visit. And you type in your question. We're going to take a look at that, see which person on the team has the most expertise in that area and farm that out. We'll have a 30-minute Zoom call, or in some cases, if it's possible, in person. We are standing by to help. We have a ton of experience, as I mentioned, and it would be our privilege to be able to help you. So reach out to those resources through Shamrock. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention. Good luck out there.